More than 40,000 years ago, in a rocky shelter tucked within the valleys of central Spain, a Neanderthal dipped a finger into a small amount of red ochre and pressed it onto the surface of a carefully chosen stone. That moment, frozen in time, left behind more than a trace of colour. It preserved a fingerprint, a ghostly spiral of human touch etched into prehistoric silence. Discovered in the San Lázaro rock shelter in Segovia, this ochre-marked pebble may be the oldest fingerprint in pigment in Europe, and perhaps the most intimate proof of Neanderthal symbolic thought. In this solitary mark lies an entire world of questions. Who was this individual? Why mark this stone? What did this act mean? The discovery has rippled through the world of paleoanthropology because it encapsulates several key dimensions of Neanderthal behavior: the manipulation of ochre pigments, the selection of symbolic artifacts, and the deeply rooted presence of Neanderthal groups in the Iberian Peninsula, long after their kind had vanished from most of Europe. Unearthed during excavations in 2022 and studied extensively in 2024 and 2025, the San Lázaro pebble is no ordinary artifact. It is a quartz-rich granite stone, unusually large compared to the other hammerstones found in the same layer, and adorned with 3 small cupules, natural depressions that, to the human eye, resemble eyes and a mouth. At the centre, a subcircular red dot of ochre sits precisely equidistant between the depressions, creating a symmetrical composition. Through multispectral imaging, a fingerprint was revealed embedded in the pigment, a print likely made by the right index finger of an adult Neanderthal. The forensic analysis was exhaustive. Ridge breadths, minutiae, and directionality all pointed to the reality of an intentional fingerprint. Statistical modelling dismissed the possibility that the dot was randomly placed. Instead, it appeared carefully aligned to occupy the space like a nose between a pair of stylized eyes. This led researchers to propose an extraordinary interpretation. The pebble may have been chosen for its face-like appearance and marked deliberately to enhance the resemblance, a Neanderthal example of face pareidolia and abstract symbolic thinking. But whether it was meant to portray a face, a totem, or something far more enigmatic, this artifact challenges any lingering assumption that Neanderthals lacked the cognitive depth of Homo sapiens. The fingerprint is more than a forensic trace. It is a human signature from another kind of human. The fingerprint would mean little if not for what it was made with: red ochre. For Neanderthals, ochre, both red and yellow, was no mere earth. It was a potent material, collected, ground, heated, and applied in ways that still baffle archaeologists. Red ochre is a fully oxidized iron compound that produces deep crimson and rust hues. Yellow ochre, on the other hand, is a hydrated form of iron oxide that gives off a mustard yellow or golden color. Intriguingly, when yellow ochre is heated to temperatures between 250 degrees Celsius and 500 degrees Celsius, it transforms into red ochre, a change that ancient humans likely discovered and exploited. Evidence of both ochre types has been found in Mousterian contexts across Europe, often far from their geological sources, suggesting purposeful gathering and transportation. At Pech-de-Laz in France, red ochre was found associated with Neanderthal hearths and stone tools. In the cave of Cueva Anton and the nearby Cueva de los Aviones in Spain, shells with traces of both yellow and red ochre were discovered, interpreted as pendants, beads, or containers used for pigments. Ochre had many uses. Functionally, it may have been employed in hide processing, as an insect repellent, or as an antibacterial salve. Symbolically, it served as a cosmetic, a ritual medium, or even a visual language. When Neanderthals painted themselves with ochre or left marks in caves or on stones, they were not merely colouring surfaces, they were expressing something internal, something mental, perhaps even spiritual. The act of marking an object with ochre, especially with one's fingertip, suggests an awareness of aesthetics, self and memory. The caves along Spain's southeastern coast have yielded some of the most compelling evidence for Neanderthal symbolic life, long predating the arrival of Homo sapiens in the region. At Cueva de los Aviones, dated to about 115,000 years ago, researchers found pierced marine shells stained with red and yellow pigments. Some shells contained residues that suggest they were used as paint cups, primitive palettes holding prepared pigment mixtures. One of the shells even bore traces of hematite and lepidocrasite, indicating intentional blending of minerals for pigment production. Nearby, at Cueva Anton, dated to roughly 50,000 years ago, perforated shells were found strung on sinew, indicating they were worn as necklaces or ornaments. These shells too bore traces of ochre, again linking pigment to display, identity, or ritual. The perforations were not natural. They were drilled intentionally, likely with stone tools, demonstrating careful craftsmanship and the use of personal adornment. These shell necklaces are remarkable because they represent a fusion of natural beauty, technological skill, and cultural significance. The use of sinew to string the shells suggests they were worn on the body, possibly during rituals, social gatherings, or rites of passage. The application of ochre to the shells adds another layer of meaning, transforming them from mere jewelry into objects of symbolic power. Importantly, these discoveries predate the arrival of modern humans in Western Europe. The old assumption that Homo sapiens brought symbolic behavior to the continent is now definitively challenged. Neanderthals, without contact with sapiens, were independently collecting shells, processing pigments, and assembling decorative items. What did these symbols mean to Neanderthals? We may never know, but the fact that they made them at all shows that they were not simply survival machines. They were social beings with values, perhaps stories, and certainly ideas worth preserving through material culture. As Europe grew colder and Neanderthal populations declined, the Iberian Peninsula became their final stronghold. From around 45,000 to 42,000 years ago, Neanderthals retreated into southern and central Spain long after they had disappeared from France, Germany, or Britain. It was here, in isolated caves, dry plateaus and river valleys, that they held out against the oncoming wave of modern humans. Sites like Los Casares, El Salt, and Abrigo del Molino, all located in Spain, show Mousterian levels dating to the final millennia of Neanderthal presence. There's no sign of cultural blending with Homo sapiens, no hybrid toolkits, and no layered occupations. This suggests that for a time, Iberia was purely Neanderthal, a refuge sealed off from the transformations happening elsewhere in Europe. San Lázaro itself, where the fingerprinted pebble was found, fits this pattern. Located near the Eresma River, its stratigraphy reveals a continuous Neanderthal occupation ending around 42,000 years ago. In this rock shelter, the pebble was found in an untouched Mousterian context, one without any sign of later Homo sapiens intrusion. This makes Iberia not only a geographic refuge but a cultural redoubt, a place where the last expressions of Neanderthal identity, creativity and memory were played out in ochre and stone. As cold climates and changing ecosystems shrank their world, Neanderthals here still painted, still made tools, and still selected pebbles with face-like features to mark with their fingers. Spain, then, becomes not just a region on the map, but a kind of monument, a memorial to the final chapters of Neanderthal evolution and cognition. The San Lázaro fingerprint is just one ridge among many in the fossil record of Neanderthal life, but it represents a unique fusion of biology, material culture, and symbolic action. It is not a skull or a stone tool, but a gesture, a deliberate act carried out by an individual whose mind was capable of abstraction, composition, and perhaps even longing. It brings us as close as we can get to the Neanderthal touch. In that simple ochre print lies a deeply human story. A story of someone who chose a peculiar stone, noticed its form, and completed it with a mark. Whatever that mark was meant to mean, it does something no other fossil can do. It speaks directly to us. In that way, it forces us to reimagine Neanderthals not as failed humans or evolutionary footnotes, but as our kindred minds, shaped by different histories, but equipped with many of the same instincts: to mark, to decorate, to remember. Their ochre-stained shells, their red-painted faces, their symmetrical pebbles, these are not relics of savagery, but signs of a parallel lineage of humanity. And Spain, land of caves and pigments, is the stage where that lineage made its final stand, not in violence, but in colour, touch, and symbol. "40,000 years ago, in the dimming light of a cold grey sky, the valley stood quiet, its silence punctuated only by the whisper of the wind through ancient trees. This was the Neander Valley, where a most primal tribe still clung to existence. Their bodies were stout, their foreheads low, their faces jutting forward in a visage of savage strength. They were the last of their kind, Neanderthals, an ancient people, but a people doomed to oblivion. The time had come for the earth to purge itself of these relics, for their crude existence was a remnant of ages long past, incompatible with the destiny of modern man. Taller and with foreheads that spoke to a growing intelligence, these modern humans saw the Neanderthals not as kin, but as savage beasts, a breed unfit for the future. Their bones, heavy and strong, betrayed a brutish nature, incapable of true speech, of artistry, or even the simplest forms of worship. And so, the Neanderthals must be extinguished, swept from the land like dust, to make way for the ascent of modern man. And on this night, under the cover of darkness, the modern humans would rain destruction from the sky. Their flaming arrows were prepared, their tips wrapped in cloth soaked in the fat of wild animals. They purged the valley of its savagery, as was their right, for they were the future. The valley, now devoid of the Neanderthals, was theirs to claim, to settle, and to shape. The world was changing, and the modern human would be its new masters. The old ways, the brutish and the primitive, were gone, swept away by the fire and the arrow. The future belonged to them alone. The savage race has no place in the world that was to come, and in the chaos that followed, Neanderthal villages were pillaged and plundered. And so, the world was made anew, as modern man, the true inheritors of the earth, looked forward to a future where the crude, brutish forms of the Neanderthals would be nothing but a memory, a curiosity for those who would one day dig beneath the soil long after the world had forgotten them. The modern humans left the valley that night, leaving behind only the stillness of death, and the certainty that their kind, with its greater mind and finer frame, was destined to shape the earth. The Neanderthals of this valley were gone, their race extinguished not by nature, but by the hand of man. Nevertheless,